Welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Colorado Rundown. I'm Kristi Burton Brown, Executive Vice President here at Advanced Colorado, joined today by a special guest, Kim Gilmartin, who is the co-founder of Ascent Schools and the Executive Director of the Liberty Schools Initiative, two very important things that touch a lot of lives in Colorado. So Kim, we brought you on today to just share some of your stories, some of your expertise with other people across the state who really care about the issue of school choice. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I think I'm definitely going to ask you about some specific stories and then some advice that you have to offer, but I think kind of setting it up for everyone to understand school choice in Colorado historically hasn't been a partisan issue. It's been something that is broadly supported by people of all walks of life in Colorado historically, because we were one of the first states in the nation to allow charter schools, to approve them in the legislature, and the bill that did it was bipartisan. And so I think just that little piece of history is important for people to remember as they kind of get this overview of school choice, because you hear about all the battles, like charter schools trying to come into districts that won't allow them no matter how many parents sign up. You hear about all the waiting lists in charter schools across the state. So just backing up and knowing like this is a broadly popular thing. We're one of the best schools for school choice in the nation if you look at our state laws. But as you've seen, Kim, it doesn't always play out that way in school districts.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I do think we have very good Colorado laws here for charter schools. We've been a choice state for a long time, and it's how I've been able to help get soon to be 7 classical charter schools open. But I'm, as you mentioned, the co-founder of 4 classical charters, the Ascent Classical Schools, and although we had 4 schools that we were able to get open, we put applications in to 8 different school districts. So we were denied in a number of these districts, and we did appeal 2 of them at the State Board of Education, and it's difficult. And I have learned that over the years that a lot of the reasons for denial are the same. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And that if we don't get school boards and people that are on those school boards that truly believe in choice in education, then we're going to have a difficult time getting more of these schools opened. And that's really the key, is because I have put in solid applications in these school districts. We have had a ton of interest. Expressions of interest is where you show the school board and the school district that you have a lot of parents that want this.
Absolutely.
And there are best practices and numbers that we need to meet. And we meet all of those. But what I have found is that with a lot of school boards, depending on ideologically where they fall on whether they believe in charter schools or not, I find that it's a very subjective vote that they make, and it's arbitrary as to what they think is wrong and why they won't approve our schools.
Yeah, no, I think you're really right about that. If you ever listen to the hearings, some of the reasons that are brought out just don't really meet or match, I should say, the application. It's like, no, the objection you're making actually is well explained in the application, and are really listening to the parents in the area who want a different educational option for their kids. Or are you just tying yourself to an ideological view that clearly isn't shared by the people who want another option for their kids? So I have a lot of questions for you, but I think one, I'd love it if you would, clear up some of the misinformation that's out there about charter schools. What would you say are some of the most common things that opponents of charter schools throw at them?
Sure, yeah. I'll give you the top ones. One is that charter schools won't serve special needs students or special education. Is absolutely not true. Charter schools are public schools. They must abide by all of the same state statutes and regulations. They must serve all students. They are open to all students. We have blind lotteries. We do have to follow rules around that, but we don't even ask questions as to whether a child has a learning disability until they have accepted a seat. Then once that happens, we have a meeting with the parents. We learn what their needs are. We have special education directors that will look at the IEPs, it's the individualized education program, advanced learning plans, 504s, all of the different needs, and then work with those parents and work with those students. So that is something that many opponents of charter schools will say. They also say that they say that we're not open to all students and that we cherry pick. That is not true because, again, we have a blind lottery.
Yeah.
They say that we siphon money from public schools. Well, we are a public school, so we couldn't be siphoning money.
Right.
And I think what they mean is that district schools, I like people to understand the difference between district schools and charter schools.
Sure.
District schools are all run by a school district, which is governed by one school board. So you have, there are 880,000 or so kids in the public education system in Colorado. Over 460,000 of those kids are served by the top 10 school districts in the state, right? So we're talking about Denver Public Schools, Jeffco, Douglas County, Cherry Creek, and on from there. Then the next 175,000 in that number are served by the next 10. So you have the top 10 school districts really serving 460,000 kids governed by 10 school boards.
Right.
10 school boards that have 5 to 7 people on them. That's not, we call that local control, but really parents don't have a lot of control when you're talking about hundreds of schools being served by so few people. So with a charter school, you have, usually it's a parent board. It's a local board. And so you have the parents a lot closer to what's happening in the school.
Exactly.
And that is something that, opponents of charter schools think that there is no accountability because it's not an elected school board at that top level in the district.
Right.
But it actually is. It is very accountable and very transparent. And so that is something that I hear a lot. And I want people to understand that, these charter schools are public schools. They play by the same rules, but we have a little more autonomy in terms of it being closer to the parents. And that is very, very important to me. And and anyone who's put their kids in a charter school. And it's very important to the families that are choosing to put their kids in these schools.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great explanation and breakdown of how it works. I think the reminder that a charter school absolutely is a public school is really important. Some opponents like to act like they're a private school that are taking taxpayers' money, and nothing could be further from the truth. A charter school is an absolutely legitimate, recognized in state law, a public school that, to your point, Kim, must accept any child, within, of course, they have limits. Like there's always wait lists. More people want their kids in charter schools than there are seats available. But the seats they give out do have to be equally given, just like any other publicly run program. And so I think, those are really important for people to understand. And I think if parents are choosing to pull their kid out of a neighborhood school and choose a charter school, rather than saying, as some opponents do, oh, you're taking money from the neighborhood school, the real question should be, why are parents making a different choice?
That's right.
What do they think is lacking or missing from the neighborhood school they were assigned to that's driving them to choose a different type of public education for their child?
That's right. And another important part to understand about as I said before, they say that we're siphoning money from the neighborhood schools or siphoning money from the public school system. The way it works in Colorado is that every child that is in a public school, whether it be a charter or district-run school, has a certain amount of per pupil revenue tied to them. And so when a child leaves a neighborhood school and goes into that charter school, that money follows the child, as it should. But then the district school no longer has the responsibility or the expense of educating that child. So the money should follow the child.
Right. So you don't have to take care of them anymore.
That's right.
Yes.
And you're right to point out, why is it that parents are choosing a different option? And it's because not every child fits into the same category.
No,
I
so true.
find in many district schools, and I had this experience with my own children. I live in Jefferson County. Before I put them in charter school, I had them in our neighborhood schools. And what I found was that it's sort of a one-size-fits-all model. I wanted something different for my child. I wanted a different curriculum. And the biggest differences with charter schools versus district schools is that we can choose that curriculum. We do have to meet state standards.
Yes.
We do have to have our kids take assessments and the CMAS, and they need to be passing those, and they need to be meeting district averages. Most of the time we exceed them, but they do allow for curricular autonomy. And so we might use a core knowledge curriculum or a classical curriculum, or they might want to use a Montessori curriculum or an expeditionary curriculum. These are all things that parents choose, and it's very hard to get those different curricula in the district schools because they're all governed by one board
Exactly.
and by one district and by one curriculum.
Well, I think that's another great point for people to understand because a lot of people in Colorado support the local control that they think exists with schools in Colorado. To your point, a little less local than people might think. But if you support local control, you should absolutely support charter schools because it is the most local for those students. It is specific attention and care for what works best for that collection of children who are attending that school, rather than kind of taking a bigger look and saying, well, overall, we think the entire district, and there's a lot of diversity in districts, some of the big districts, but usually those school boards adopt like one standard for everyone, whereas you really can be specific to particular needs at a charter. And a lot of parents want that. Again, that's why we have waiting lists.
That's right.
And I think that's just something that people should, if you support charter schools and you're challenged on it, like, why are there waiting lists at almost every single charter school, if not every single one, in the state of Colorado? Like, what are parents looking for? And why should we shut down or reject something that more people are asking for? There's a bigger demand than there is a supply.
That's right.
And I'd love for you, Kim, you can obviously comment on that too, but if you want to share a little bit of the story of the John Adams, hopefully I'm saying the name right, the John Adams Charter School. I think it's the new charter school that the Douglas County School Board released to CSI, the Charter School Institute. I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the John Adams Academy. So as you mentioned that I'm the executive director of the Liberty Schools Initiative, and I left the Ascent Classical Academy network of charter schools that I helped to start a couple of years ago because I realized that there was a real need for parents in different communities that wanted to start charter schools to have some help and guidance in how to navigate the shark-infested waters of authorization and getting these schools up and running. It's a very, very heavy lift. And so I started a nonprofit and helped in part by the Daniels Fund and some other funds, because these groups of parents and community members that want to get charter schools started don't have any money. It's very much a chicken and egg thing. And so I'm able to have this nonprofit which funds it so that I can go and provide these services to these groups for at no cost to them. And so I've been working in a handful of school districts over the last couple of years to help some groups of parents get charter schools open. We're still going through the process. Some have been approved and some are in the process of being approved, and all of them are in the process of opening in some way, but they're not open yet because it takes a couple of years to get them open. But I had some people come to me and say, we would really love to get a charter school started in the Sterling Ranch neighborhood of Douglas County. And that is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in Douglas County, which is the third largest school district in the state. They don't have a school yet. They're going to get a neighborhood school because a bond passed last year, thankfully. And now that neighborhood is going to get a district neighborhood school. I believe it will open with K7 or K8. I'm not sure, but great. I'm very glad they're going to get a school. But I had parents saying, we would like a different kind of a school here. We'd like a charter school that's classical. And so I said, well, I have been studying and looking at this model that has a number of schools in California, in Northern California, called the John Adams Academies. And I have a passion and a love of classical education. So my kids were classically educated. The schools that I've started are classical. And I said, well, I would love to replicate this. It's not an expansion of these schools. It's truly, it is a grassroots effort. It is a group of parents that have come together to sit on a board and replicate what they've done at the John Adams Academy. And I am sitting on that board as a part of helping to get this started because I have had experience with working with the Charter School Institute, which is the state authorizer. I suggested that we go directly to the state and become authorized through them. And one of the reasons that I thought it was a good idea to do that is that as it relates to school boards, as you know, we have elections, and the pendulum can swing to a very charter-friendly majority, to an anti-charter majority, and it's really the pendulum swings back and forth, and sometimes you have to deal with hostile authorization at that time. And so I just thought I would prefer that we have steady waters. And so I also had a lot of experience working with the Charter School Institute, and they truly exist to help charters succeed. They are not a district that is wearing both a district hat
They
and
have
a
one
charter
goal.
school hat. They have one goal. Now, that's not to say that the Charter School Institute just rubber stamps charter schools. They
Right,
don't.
at
They
all.
deny 50% of the applications that are presented to them, as they rightly should. I do not believe that charter schools that do not have a very strong application, a great plan, an identified facility, a balanced budget. I don't believe that those charter schools should just be approved, because then you're setting up families and students for failure. So,
that makes sense.
but my experience with the Charter School Institute has always been wonderful. And so we approached the Douglas County School Board, and the school board voted in December to release the application to the Charter School Institute. And let me explain a little bit about how that works. There are two paths to authorization in Colorado. Every school district, except maybe a tiny few of the smaller ones, have exclusive chartering authority.
Right.
That means that that's the local control. They are the ones who are the gatekeepers for whether or not a charter school can be approved in their district. A charter school, a school district can lose that exclusive chartering authority if they are challenged, if they have hostile chartering practices, if they've denied too many charters. But otherwise, they keep their exclusive chartering authority unless they vote to relinquish it for, it can just be one school. They're not relinquishing it across the board, just one charter school. We asked for that. The board deliberated it, and they voted to release us in December of last year. And then we submitted our application to the state at the end of March. We went through about a 3-month process. Our school was just voted to be approved last week. So very exciting.
Yeah, congratulations. That's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you. Our plan is to open with 410 students. And we are almost at 400 right now in terms of our letters of intent, which is what you look at for interest to make sure that there's demand. But we're not going to open until the fall of 2026, so we still have a lot of time to get those students enrolled. We are building a building in the Sterling Ranch area. We've been the owner or the developer has donated 25 acres of land for us to use for the school building. So just a lot of wonderful things are coming together.
That's excellent.
Yeah, to open the school.
Yeah, well, and I think you did face a lot of opposition on your way to getting there, to the ultimate goal of approving a school that clearly a lot of parents want in a growing community. But do you want to share at all about some of the opposition that you faced?
Yeah, well, we faced a lot of opposition, but I will say that the opposition we faced here was no different than the opposition that I have faced in every single school district I've gone into, and I mentioned there are 9 in the state of Colorado. The objections are always the same, but it was pretty, I would say, pretty nasty at times. What some of the opposition would do. The very first parent information meeting we held in Sterling Ranch. This was back in February, where we were just introducing the idea before we submitted our application to the community, and it was after we received the release. And we had a number of people who came. We had some that were there in support. We had a number of people who were pretty much lined up and ready to oppose this school no matter what. And they showed up, and we had there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of pushback. I was trying to explain what this school is all about, how the model is different, but we just had a hard time, getting through that. From that point on, we did a combination of some in-person meetings, and we did a lot of webinars, because we had some supporters and parents who truly were interested in putting their kids in this school say to us, I don't want to be at these meetings because I'm afraid of being targeted.
Sure, that makes sense.
And
it's sad.
It's very sad. They were worried. They didn't want to be singled out in a room and then targeted for supporting it. It's very tribal. What I have found in getting these charter schools open, you're in one camp or the other, and people will say to me, "Why? why are these
Right.
people so upset? And if they don't want the school to open, they don't have to put their child
Right.
there. And
Yeah.
I said, well, you would think that's the rational answer, but it's not the way they look at it. It's very all or nothing. And they look at themselves as the gatekeepers to public education, and we cannot let these charter schools open because it's going to make the district schools, this is my opinion, it's going to make, it's competition for the district schools. It could make the district schools lose some students. It could make them look worse, and we don't want that. And that's just part of parent choice.
Well, right. And I think it's an interesting difference in opinion to say, like, hey, I'm responsible for educating my child. If you believe in neighborhood schools, that they're always the best option, no matter where they are and how they're run, then you are absolutely free to get a free education to put your child there. But to I guess have the have the opinion that you have the right to tell another parent, I'm going to try and block the option you want for your child. I kind of find that to be like a disturbing opinion, because I think, I was homeschooled, we homeschool our kids, but I think every parent who wants to put their kid in a public school has every right to do that too. Like, I do not think you have to pick one type of education to raise every child. And so I guess I really believe in every parent's right and opportunity to do what they want.
Right.
So it just doesn't, I don't know, I think there's a lot of people out there who just wouldn't connect with them to say, why are you stepping in the way of another parent's opportunity, another family's choice? And that's why I think we do see the idea of school choice has such broad support across the state of Colorado, if we're not talking about these really like tribal groups or these insular meetings where there's maybe a few hundred people sometimes who show up. But broadly across the state, most people would say, well, yeah, I'm going to put my kids where I want to, and you should put your kids where you want to. Like, Colorado often supports individual choices, and certainly in education. So, I thank you for sharing that background. I find that to be a little disturbing, but
Well,
it's what we deal with.
I'll just add to that. I'm going to be honest. It is usually a loud, vocal minority who don't even have children in the school
I was
system
going to ask you that.
that are organizing and protesting the loudest, and many times they are affiliated with the teachers union.
So not surprise me.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is about the special interests and about competition in schools. And I believe that, people will say to me, why don't you just go open private schools? You don't have to deal with all of this. And I've said, because every child deserves, and every family deserves to have a tuition-free education choice like this one.
Right, it's good for their kids.
Like what a classical school
Yeah.
can offer, which is a well-rounded liberal arts education.
Yes.
It's something that's old that we're bringing back. We know it works. We know
Right.
it's
Yes.
proven. And everyone deserves that, not just the parents who can afford it, and not just the parents who can stay home and homeschool their children. And even if you can stay home, there are many parents who don't believe that they can do it. And so it doesn't happen. Homeschool kids, they account for 1% of the kids in Colorado who are educated. Out of, I think I said 880,000 are in public schools, but 160,000 of those are in charters, so 15%. But there are about 950,000 students, total,
Right,
K-12, and 1% are homeschooled. I mean, we need to be reaching more students. That's why I work on opening these charter schools, because parents want that tuition-free option.
Well, and to your point, Kim, all kids need to be served, and
Yes.
and all parents don't make the same choices, and not all parents have the ability to make the same choices. And I think if you're getting asked, like, why don't you open private schools? I mean, I'd even say that's somewhat like of an elitist question to
Yeah,
assume
it is.
that all these parents that are seeking a better education for their kids, like if we look at the achievement levels of neighborhood, and it's actually all public schools across the state, on average, like when you take the average number, 40% of our kids can read and do math at grade level. And so, it might make sense that some parents say, you know what, that's not good enough for my kid, or my kid just flat out isn't being served at this school. My kid's being bullied at this school. Whatever a variety of issues, the curriculum doesn't connect with my child. The classroom is too big. Like, there's a lot of objections parents have. And so to say, well, then fine, if you have any objections whatsoever, you should pay for your kid's education. You no longer deserve a public education because you want something better. And we don't want competition. I think, again, that's just a very disturbing viewpoint and very elitist to assume that everyone can afford to homeschool, everyone can afford to do private school. Like, I'm a fan of making those options more accessible and cheaper for families who want them. But I agree with you that not every family can choose that. And so to say, well, sorry, you're stuck in a free bad education if that's the district you happen to live in, and like, how dare you want a better free education for your kids?
And that is
It's not good.
what they're saying. I'm working with one charter school trying to get approved on the Western Slope. They have in that district, there is only one other charter school, and it is a high school. It's an alternative ed high school.
Okay.
There are no other charter schools in the district, and there are no choices. There's a 40% free and reduced, no, it's actually over 50% free and reduced lunch in this
Wow.
area, 40% minority, and there are no choices. And the major opponents of this charter effort are saying, open a private school. That's what you need to do. We don't need this. Or they have said, we don't, we already teach these things in our district schools. No, they don't.
Right. Why do parents want it if that's the case?
That's right. That's
Like-
right. And there's a
Doesn't
ton
make
of
sense.
interest, but so it's the same objections every time, and it's very difficult to get past those objections when you have a school board that is not going to do what's in the best interest of the district.
True. And I think actually, Kim, you brought up probably the last thing we should talk about on this podcast today, and that is school boards. In off-year elections, those are the years in November of every odd year, we elect school board members across the state. I can't remember if there's a few areas that elect them in April. I think those are only city elections. So I think it's just in November in odd years. Certainly the vast majority of school districts elect then, and a limited number of seats on every board. It's never the whole board that's up every cycle, so they kind of stagger the seats. But a lot of people don't pay as much attention in off-year elections. But it's really crucial because these are the 5 to 7 people, to your point, who are either approving or not approving a charter that hundreds of parents in the area want, or they get to decide whether or not to release the charter to CSI so that the district doesn't have to govern them or oversee them, but CSI can if that's what parents want. And so I'd love your perspective on how do you get the right people to want to run for those kind of boards, and what kind of influence can they have if they were to get elected?
Right. Oh my gosh, school board elections are so important. This is something I've been harping on for 10 years now, since I've sort of gotten involved in the charter school movement and just understanding school districts and school boards and how all of that works. But it's difficult. And I say that because when a parent, first of all, it's a volunteer position. It does take a lot of time, but there's nothing more important. I believe this is very difficult, going through these approvals, these denials in school districts, but I'm passionate about it because there's nothing more important than getting these schools open and providing a good education, especially when you look at the numbers that you talked about. Some districts, 25% of kids can do math at grade level, 40% English language arts. It's heartbreaking. And so there is so much work to be done, but it is a volunteer job, and it's difficult to go through these races because many times the union puts a lot of money behind opposing people who aren't associated with that side. A lot of times, if you are someone who says, I believe in charter, I believe in parent choice, then you're going to be painted with a brush, and they're going to drag you through the mud. That happens. I've known so many people who have run for school boards, but you can win too. And if you just put if you say, I'm going to do this, I feel I'm called to it, I want to make a difference in my school district, there's nothing more important. And so I am encouraging people to consider running for a seat if they need someone. Almost every school district right now is going to have an election this year. There's usually 2, 3, sometimes 4 seats up. This is a big year for that. And, I look at what can you do when you're there? Well, you can make sure that you are, if there's a charter school application that's brought forward, making sure that you're giving it a fair evaluation, getting lots of advice on that, talking to other districts that have approved charter schools and understand what they need to be looking for, and knowing that that's a difference that you can make when you're in that seat. That's forever, approving a charter school. Also, just working on how can I make the curriculum? How can we make little tweaks to the curriculum and make it better? How can we listen to parents more? just getting closer to the parents. That's what I think is important with these school board races. And I hope that parents or community members, grandparents are great to be on these school boards because they have a little more time.
Right.
And they don't have, little ones that they're raising. But I just think it's so important to have good people step up.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think it's, it's education to let people know these seats are available and anyone can do it. I serve on the State Board of Education. We hear charter appeals when they come up to us. That's also a volunteer position. But I agree with you that just being involved in the education system, because this is where most of our kids get educated, is the public education system. So making, while I may make a different choice for my kids, like the generation they're growing up with are largely in public school. And so it needs to be good, and we need to have better and more options for all kids.
That's right.
And so I think, investing some of your own time, even if it's volunteer, is really beneficial to kids who are affected by it. And so I agree with you. I hope more people will step up. At Advance Colorado, we do offer training, New Leader Academy training for people who are considering running for office. Just give them some educational information on like, hey, here's what you're getting into. Here's experts we can connect you to, and how you can, understand how to run a good race in your community. So if people want to find out more about your Liberty Schools initiative, Kim, how can they do that?
Yeah, so they can visit my website. It's libertyschoolsinitiative.org, and my contact information is on there. I would love for people who are in a school district where they'd like to see a charter school open to reach out to me. And I don't know that I can help them, but I can try to take a look at the landscape, figure out, to give them some pointers on what they need to be looking at. And I might even be able to, depending on the school district, I might be able to bring all the resources together for them. But what I need parents or grandparents or community members that are interested in this and that are going to spearhead it, because I can't spearhead it, to come to me and say, we want to do this. Tell us about it. Exactly. And I will walk them through what they need. And then they can decide, that's too much work, or
it's worth it. Yeah.
Or I want to do it. And then we go through it. And it's a multi-year process, but it is it's so satisfying. And I can't tell you the thousands of kids that are now enrolled in some of these classical charter schools that I've been a part of, helping to open, that have reached out and said, thank you. This has just changed our families' lives. And, it's so important. And we need good people also to serve on those charter boards. As we start these schools. Absolutely. We need good people, because it is a lot of work, and we need dedicated people, and they get tired. We have to keep passing the baton on to other people, because we get tired, and we need fresh blood.
That's true. A lot of work, rewarding work, but still a lot. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim, so much. It's been great to have you today.
You're welcome.
All right. You've been listening to another episode of the Advanced Colorado Rundown. I'm Kristi Burton Brown, today with Kim Gilmartin. And share this with your friends, especially if they're interested in helping start charter schools in their area. And we will catch you next time.